Hello, I'm Charu Bokol. I am a jewelry designer and a lover of meditation. My journey began in 2020, which was the journey of getting to love meditation, but it wasn't always like that. If I click back in hindsight, I think my story really began in 2009 when I was a freshly minted graduate of a very um, amazing business school in India. And I was in this big job, a banking job, which I thought would give me beauty, benefit, and a lot of good. And it did. It gave me a lot of financial independence for the first time, and I really loved it. But a huge part of me was not happy about the lack of creativity in that job, and it always felt like I was somehow betraying myself by not using my gifts and talents. And I was always super creative as a child, as an adult, and yet I was in this job, and it took me earning a lot of money, earning promotions, and then realizing that it all doesn't mean anything when your heart is not happy doing what you do. And so I actually worked to find what was my calling, what was it that I wanted to do. And back in that time, I actually listed for a jewelry design course that was something that I could do along with my job on the weekends. And I have to tell you, it completely changed my life. It was such an amazing creative output. And those 4 or 5 hours on the weekends and in the evenings sometimes after the job became the most happy time of my life. And so that was a big clue. And long story short, I actually took that course, made a portfolio, and decided to actually pursue this as a career and fought immense odds to get admitted to one of the top schools, Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, back in 2010. And that was my test. If this was really the right path for me, then I felt like I would just apply to the top school and in their accelerated program. And if I'm accepted, then I feel that the universe supports me, and I got accepted. But I had this amazing job at the time, and it was a huge, not so pleasant surprise for my family, because this was a really good job, a very promising path, and yet I was leaving it all behind to start from scratch when everyone around me was already making leaps forward. I was actually taking 10 steps backward and going back to school, and without any guarantees of whether there will be a career that was waiting for me in jewelry design or not, and in a different country, in a different continent where I had never been. That was the first time I feel I really listened to the calling within, the inner voice that said this was the right path. And I felt so aligned with it that even though this was such a leap into the unknown, I just went for it. And despite the odds, which is another story in itself of how to get an American visa to come study here, I actually came in 2010, and I won't dive into this story today, but over the next 14 years, I was able to build an amazing career in New York, in jewelry, in fashion. I have worked with some incredible names in the world of fashion, and I've worked with some amazing people that have taught me how to be and how not to be. I love jewelry, and I love that it is a major part of self-expression like clothes, but jewelry is also so personal and such an adornment that can be really meaningful to you. And all my training of 14 years was in learning to create beauty, to release beauty rather, through jewelry. And I thought I was doing really well until it was 2020. And this was another pivotal moment in my life and in my story. In 2020, I was following this amazing intuitive, and she had a meditation that I just tried for the first time. I had never really meditated before. And so in this meditation, I had no expectations, and yet somehow I ended up going really deep. And there was a profound message I received in this meditation. That meditation said to me, remember who you are. That was the message I received. Remember who you are. And at the time, I wasn't really tuned in to what that meant, whether it had a meaning or not. This was the beginning of 2020. A few months later, in the middle of the year, my husband of 10 years, somebody who I had known for 10 years, told me that the reason why our marriage had been so not satiating and hurtful, and almost on the verge of breakage, was because he wanted to be a woman. I cannot tell you the profound level of shock I felt in that moment, because I had built my whole life around this relationship, this marriage. It was so important to me. And stuff like this, when it happens, really just, pulls the rug from under you. But also, it really made me question who I was without this marriage. And I wasn't happy with the answers, because as a woman, I had made this marriage the most important part of my life. And so when the marriage could not exist anymore, thanks to a healthy amount of self-love that I had, that even in that deep, desperate moment, I knew that, well, this is not going to work out for me anymore. And I was very clear about it. And I'm grateful for that self-love that I had in that moment, that this is not the path for me. You have a different path, I said to my then husband, but that is not mine anymore. Nevertheless, it really sucked. And I was in a really dark place. This was also, unfortunately, the time when COVID was at its peak and the world was shut down and isolated, and I was alone in many ways. And to feel that level of loneliness and an existential crisis when one of the primary relationships in your life sort of crumbles, and then you're completely isolated from the world, it really made me question if life was worth living. And in a deep, exasperated, dark moment, I really wanted to end my life. It felt like I couldn't take it anymore. And I almost saw life as an enemy, really. Like, what have you done to me? What did I do to deserve this? Why me? And in that really deep, dark state, there was one time when I almost ended my life. And I remember that moment clearly, because as I was about to end my life, I had this voice, very, very slow to start, soft and slow, but it slowly began to grow and became to like a boombox level voice. And the voice said, "This is not the end." And I didn't want to hear this voice. I was really annoyed by it. And I just was like, I wish you go away. But I feel now, looking back, that this is the second pivotal moment in my life when I really heard the call of my higher self. And thankfully, I listened. I stopped. I paused. I was angry. I was crying, but I stopped and I listened and I said, then show me the way. And my older sister introduced me to the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I, at some level, really resonated with it. But I was also really mad at him because I heard one of his podcast interviews where he was talking about doing the meditative work, and he calls it the work. And he said, if you did this work continuously and honestly for 60 days, that you would change your life. You would love life. You would wake up loving life. And as someone who was suicidal, to me, this was really problematic, really difficult, really troublesome, triggering to hear. And yet I could tune into that part of me, that voice that said, this is the path. And so very annoyingly and begrudgingly and resentfully, I'm giving myself all sorts of explanations of why this will not work for me. And I'm so special. My suffering is so special and it is so difficult, which it was. I gave in. and I started just practicing with his meditations, just putting it on my ears, just doing what I thought he was saying, just following his lead and putting one foot in front of the other. And that is how I started. And these meditations really made a profound impact because I also started to read his books and really get to understand what is it that I'm doing in these meditations, because his work is not very passive work where you just meditate and then forget about it. It's really about becoming a new person. It's about really changing what needs to change in yourself for your environment to change. And I dived deep into it. And as I dove deep into it, my life started to begin to show signs of change, of growth, of peace, of not wanting to die. And I meditated morning and evening for 60 days, and it made such a profound impact on me that I actually decided that I'm going to have 365 days of meditating regularly because I was feeling this relief and peace and calm and joy, actually. And I could realize how profound the work is. Long story short, I have now been doing this work for 4 years. I have dove into several aspects of spirituality and meditation. And I feel that it has really profoundly shifted my lens from that to being a creative who was just a human being going through suffering and divorce and marriage was everything, to now where I feel I have really healed from heartbreak because I have understood the divine aspect of myself. I have experienced it through the work and through meditations. I have really gone deep inside and found things that were holding me, found places inside me that were accountable for circumstances in my life. And I have been able to see them, accept them, change them, and the results have been profound. And also not just about finding love again, which I have, but it's also about finding self again, finding a reason for being that is not so dependent on external environment like relationships or something else. And the recovery from heartbreak has been a profound spiral. It was not a linear path in any way, but it was a beautiful path. And I've had incredible insights, a divine connection that I feel has profoundly changed me, and I can never go back to being who I was before this divorce. And I feel that a certain part of me has just awakened. And I fully understand when people say, when masters have said, we are human and divine, and I've understood why I was given this challenge. And I honestly can say today, from a really peaceful place, that I'm really grateful for this setback, for this pain, because it brought me the gift of awakening, and I accept it wholeheartedly and happily. And there are so many more insights and quantum leaps, I would say, in my own understanding of what life is, that I would love to share them with you.
I'm Charu Bokal. I am a jewelry designer and a lover of meditation and everything spiritual. I wasn't always like this though. I wanted to do many things but meditate. But that all changed in 2020. But before I go further, let me take you a little bit back. My story, as I see it today, really started, I think, back in 2009. I had just graduated from business school and was really happy to get accepted into one of the top jobs in India in banking. And I spent the next 3 years really struggling, learning, being really frustrated, and also earning a lot of money. I think that was the part of my awakening that money is not everything. Why I was so unhappy at that time was because I was not happy to be a banker. It felt completely not aligned with who I was and the gifts I had. I was always super creative as a child, and yet in my job, I was not able to use any of it. I wanted to do something creative. I decided to do something about it. And I took a weekend course in jewelry design because it jumped out at me out of nowhere. And I said, I want to do something creative. Let me try this. And I tried it. I loved it. And got a very long story short, even a weekend course doing something after work filled me with joy and excitement about my future. And I decided to apply to FIT, which is one of the best jewelry design schools in New York. And I applied to their accelerated program. And I said, well, if I get into one of the toughest places to get into, it's an accelerated program based on a portfolio, then maybe I'll know that this is really it. And I fought tremendous odds to get a visa, to get in, to be accepted, which of course I was. I fought tremendous odds and got myself to United States. So within a matter of a month, I left my job, which of course was a big surprise to my family and not a good one. And for me, a huge leap into the unknown. But that was the beginning of my story. I left everything known, a job, a thriving career, a promotion, all of it, to get back to school, to learn something that I felt deep inside was the right thing to do. I came to New York in 2010 without any promises of a job or even a future. I actually had no idea how it would work out. And over the next 14 years, I actually built a thriving career in New York jewelry scene. I have worked with some incredible names in fashion. I have worked with some incredible people, some not so good ones, but long story short, I created a profoundly satisfying jewelry career working in different brands and learning a lot. And so this was my training in creating beauty. Then came 2020. In 2020, in the beginning of the year, I was called to do a meditation. In that meditation, for the first time, actually, I meditated and got a profound message that I couldn't understand at the time. And that message said, remember who you are. I didn't know at the time what was going on. My personal life at the time was sort of up in the air, but I didn't really know what was coming. And when the world was shut down due to COVID, my husband revealed to me how he wanted to be a woman, and it explained the pain and trauma in our relationship that had been for so many years. My husband of 10 years, I felt like I didn't even know him. Obviously, this revelation and the divorce that followed left me without any standing of myself, without knowing myself, without knowing life. I felt deeply distraught as to how could you spend so much time with someone and not know them. I didn't see this coming at all. I was in profound state of shock and the isolation that came with COVID. It was a really dark, very difficult time in my life. 2020 was just dark and difficult because COVID had grasped the whole world. But in my life, I just had the rug pulled from under me. I feel like the rug had just evaporated. And even in that moment of deep, dark despair, I knew that this marriage with my husband's gender dysphoria was not for me anymore. And I chose to separate. This separation came at its own cost and was a really difficult divorce. I think the most difficult part was that I didn't know what life was. I didn't know why it was. I didn't know who I was without this marriage. And it put me in a really dark place where I wanted to end this life. I was so exasperated with not understanding what life was that I wanted to end it. And I remember that moment very clearly. It was really easy for me to have ended my life, and I was about to, when I heard this voice. I didn't know where it was coming from, but it was initially very calm and peaceful, and it gradually became really loud in my ears. And the voice said, "This is not the end." I remember being really, really mad at this voice. Go away. I don't want to hear you. I just want this to stop. I want the pain to stop. And this voice, like boom boxes in my ears, said, "This is not the end." I was really confused by it. But I answered the call again in my life at a very profound moment. Thankfully, I answered this call and decided to not end my life. That began a journey of finding out what this voice was, what that message was about remembering who I am. It got me deep into the world of Dr. Joe Dispenza and meditation and spirituality. On this path of meditation, all I wanted to know was there more to life? Was there meaning to what was happening to me? And I remember watching Dr. Joe Dispenza in a YouTube video talking about his meditation work as the work. And he said, if you do this work continuously and honestly for 60 days, you will see a profound shift in your life. You will love life. I remember scoffing at this sentence at the time. Newly separated from my husband, having no support from anyone else because it was deeply isolated time because of COVID, and also just feeling completely hopeless about life. When I heard someone say, well, this work will change how you look at life, I really was annoyed initially. I came up with all sorts of explanations of why that is not true, why that will not work for me. I was too sad, too destroyed. My life was totally garbage at the time for me, and hopeless. I felt sheer hopelessness about change. Even the thought of thinking about the future would fill me with dread. Somewhere deep inside, there was that voice again. It told me to give this a shot. It told me that that was my path. And so, despite all odds, and bravely enough, I decided to give his work a shot, which meant that on December 31st, 2019, I decided that for the next 60 days, I will do his meditations regularly, morning and evening, that I would give it my best shot and see what happens. And as I dove deep into that work, it gradually but surely changed me. I went in 60 days from being completely hopeless to actually pretty decently happy. And in 60 days, I came to a point where I started to see some hope and actually decided, well, this is really working. I'm going to extend the 60 days to actually 365 days this year of nonstop getting to know, what is this voice inside me? What was that message? And I was starting to hear from the divine side of me. Long story short, in that 1 year, I changed immensely. I started to get in touch with the divine side of us that is always there, but I was deaf and blind to. And it completely changed my perspective on life, on hardship, on heartbreak. I understood that we both have both human and divine side. And I understood basically the meaning of all that had happened to me in that 1 year. This year was a divine awakening. It was the awakening of that inner voice. and it has led me down a path which has been a spiral path, actually, not a linear path of recovery, healing, heartbreak, and then profound healing in many areas of my life. It got me into many things spiritual, and I was finally open enough to explore the many aspects of spirituality. This has led me to really embrace both the human and divine aspects of myself. As I already told you about my jewelry career, I was trained in creating beauty. And I feel like my life since 2020, the last 4 years, have been a training in understanding life, understanding meaning, and therefore they have been a training in meaning. And now I feel that my lens is not just of beauty. My lens to look at life is both beauty and meaning. It's both human and divine. And it has led to phenomenal changes in my life. And I'm so excited to now actually do things that bring me joy and meaning, like my jewelry line that I'm working on, which has been a divine dream for me of the last 4 years. Bringing the beauty and meaning behind everything spiritual that I have understood, taking my most valuable insights that really helped me. They were reminders of change, of possibility, of being unlimited. I want to bring all of that to you through my story, through my podcast, and my jewelry. So, if any of this resonates with you, please subscribe, please drop me a comment, and let me know. I love hearing from you. I will share more of my insights and everything that has helped me on this journey, because my story could be your story, because so many other people's experiences informed my path. I feel it is only fair that my path can also help others like me navigate the big ups and downs in life. We are all in this together, and I am very, very grateful to be able to do my part. So, I hope you enjoyed this story. I will go deeper into it in other parts. And for today, have a lovely day.